7 miles down, water pressure can crush steel in an instant. No sunlight has ever reached that depth. Only a handful of machines have ever survived the trip. In 1995, an unmanned Japanese robot went down anyway, with no crew and no way to fix a mistake once it started sinking. Years later, its camera caught something that should never have been there at all. The machine that went where people could not safely follow. In 1995, the Japan Agency for Marine Earth Science and Technology finished building an unmanned robot called Kaiko, a Japanese word meaning ocean trench. It had no pilot and no cabin for a human being. Instead, it worked in two connected pieces, a launcher that stayed higher in the water, and a smaller diving unit that dropped further down on a thin cable, both controlled from a ship on the surface far above. That March, Kaiko became the second craft in history to reach the floor of the Mariana Trench, touching down at 10,911 meters. Only the manned submersible Trieste had gone that deep before, back in 1960, and no unmanned machine had ever made the trip. Kaiko carried cameras built to survive crushing pressure, mechanical arms for grabbing samples, and lights strong enough to cut through total darkness where no natural light had ever traveled. Between 1995 and 2003, Kaiko made more than 250 dives across the world's oceans, some in shallow coastal water and some at the very edge of what any machine could survive. It searched for shipwrecks, mapped hydrothermal vents on the ocean floor, and studied strange bacteria and small animals nobody had filmed before. It weighed over 10 tons and needed a support ship tracking it constantly from above, just to stay safe during every dive. One of those routine trips to the bottom, in 1998, ended up capturing footage that researchers are still talking about decades later. It happened almost by accident, during a survey that was never meant to make headlines at all. The day the camera found something that should not have been there. On May 20th, 1998, Kaiko was gliding along the seafloor of the Mariana Trench at a depth of 10,898 meters, nearly 7 miles beneath the surface of the Pacific Ocean. Its cameras were rolling the entire time, recording every rock, every strange creature, every shift in the mud stirred up by its own thrusters. Then something drifted into frame that did not belong in a place with no sunlight and almost no visitors in all of human history. Sitting on the bottom of the deepest trench on the planet was a single-use plastic bag. It was not tangled in wreckage or buried in sediment. It sat there in plain view, exactly the kind of bag someone might carry groceries home in, resting where fewer than a handful of machines had ever gone. The exact coordinates and depth of the sighting were later logged in a public archive built to track debris found during deep-sea missions. For years, the footage sat largely unnoticed inside that archive. Kaiko had recorded thousands of hours of video over its lifetime, and one plastic bag among all of that material did not immediately stand out. It only became public knowledge years later, once researchers reviewing the full collection realized how often plastic kept turning up at extreme depths, and how far down it had been, quietly piling up the entire time. That single frame of plastic on the seafloor turned out to be part of a much bigger and much stranger pattern that scientists had barely begun to understand, one that stretched far beyond a single bag caught on camera. Why a plastic bag nearly 7 miles down was so disturbing. A plastic bag by itself sounds harmless enough. Finding one at the bottom of the Mariana Trench is a different story entirely. That spot sits farther from any coastline than almost anywhere else on the planet, buried under nearly 7 miles of freezing water in total darkness, under pressure over 1,000 times what a person feels standing at sea level. Nothing about that environment should make it an easy place for surface trash to end up. Researchers who later studied the full archive of debris photos collected by robots like Kaiko found this was not an isolated case at all. Out of thousands of dives spanning decades, more than 3,000 pieces of man-made debris had been recorded on camera across the world's oceans. Plastic turned out to be the single most common category, and the deeper the researchers looked, the higher that percentage climbed. Below 6,000 meters, more than half of all debris spotted on camera was plastic, and almost all of it was the disposable, single-use kind, the sort of item meant to be thrown away minutes after it gets used. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. That meant the plastic bag Kaiko filmed was not a strange one-time accident that happened to drift into the wrong place at the wrong time. It was a small, visible sign that ocean currents were carrying human trash down into the deepest trenches on Earth as a matter of routine, year after year, largely unnoticed by anyone on the surface. And the trash sitting out in the open on the seafloor turned out to be only the part a camera could actually see. The creatures living right next to the trash. The Mariana Trench is not empty, even at its absolute deepest point. Scientists have found shrimp-like scavengers called amphipods thriving at nearly every depth researchers have ever explored there, including the very bottom of the Challenger Deep, the lowest point in the entire trench. One species in particular, called Hirondelia gigas, became a major focus of research after Kaiko itself collected live specimens in May 1998. The very same year, the plastic bag was caught on camera. These amphipods survive in one of the harshest environments on the planet by eating almost anything organic that sinks down from far above. That includes tiny particles of dead plankton drifting down from sunlit waters, and on rare occasions, the remains of something as large as a whale carcass settling on the seafloor. That habit makes them remarkably good at surviving in a place with almost no steady food supply of its own. It also makes them remarkably good at absorbing anything else that happens to be mixed in with that food during its long journey down. For years, scientists studied these creatures mainly out of curiosity about how any animal could survive under that much crushing pressure at all. Then a different research team went looking for something specific inside their bodies, something nobody expected to find at that depth, and what they uncovered turned out to be far more alarming than a floating plastic bag ever could be. The study that found something worse than trash. In 2017, a research team led by Alan Jameson of Newcastle University, working alongside colleagues from the University of Aberdeen and the James Hutton Institute, published a study in the scientific journal Nature Ecology and Evolution. The team collected benthic amphipod crustaceans from two of the deepest trenches on Earth, the Mariana Trench and the Kermadec Trench, both located in the Pacific Ocean, and tested their tissue for two specific groups of man-made chemicals. What they found held steady no matter what angle they looked at it from. Regardless of the exact depth the amphipods came from, regardless of which of the two trenches they were pulled out of, and regardless of the specific species involved, every single sample tested positive for two groups of industrial pollutants known as PCBS and PBDES. The researchers stated plainly in their published findings that these chemicals showed up in every sample, across every species, at every depth, in both trenches without exception. These were not natural substances that simply occur in ocean water. They came from decades of industrial manufacturing carried out on the surface, thousands of miles away from the trench itself, and nearly 7 miles above where these amphipods actually spend their entire lives. Contaminant levels measured inside these small deep-sea scavengers were, in some cases, considerably higher than levels documented in heavily industrialized regions, located far closer to human factories and cities. A place with no sunlight, no nearby factories, and almost no direct daily contact with human activity, had somehow become one of the most contaminated ecosystems scientists had ever measured on the planet. The reason came down to the very trait that had allowed these small creatures to survive there for so long in the first place, and that trait was about to make perfect, uncomfortable sense. How pollution travels 7 miles straight down PCBs, short for polychlorinated biphenyls, were widely used throughout much of the 20th century in electrical equipment and various manufacturing processes before most countries eventually banned them due to serious health concerns. PBDES were commonly used as flame retardants in furniture, electronics, and textiles for decades. Both chemical groups share one especially dangerous trait that made this discovery possible in the first place. Do not break down easily over time, and they do not mix well with water at all. Because these chemicals naturally repel water, they cling instead to tiny bits of organic material floating through the ocean, the exact same kind of falling particles and decaying matter that amphipods rely on for food every single day. This means the very same natural process that delivers most of the energy supply to life in the deep sea also happens to be an extremely efficient way of delivering pollution straight down to creatures that have never had any direct contact with people, factories, or cities anywhere on the surface. Scientists have linked PCBs to cancer and other serious health problems in animal studies, and PBDES have been tied to thyroid problems in laboratory testing, which is part of why so many countries have worked to phase out their use over the past several decades. Nobody yet knows exactly how these particular chemicals are affecting the amphipods living at the bottom of the Mariana Trench over the long run, but the researchers behind the 2017 study made clear that finding these pollutants there at all, at that depth, in every single sample tested, was reason enough for serious concern going forward. While the pollution study was revealing an invisible threat hiding inside living creatures nearly 7 miles down, the very machine that had helped make discoveries like this possible in the first place was quietly heading toward its own final mission, and it ended in a way nobody on the research team saw coming. The machine that never came back. On May 29, 2003, while Kaiko was working in a completely different stretch of the Pacific Ocean, far from the Mariana Trench, a typhoon moved through the area during an active mission. The cable connecting Kaiko to its launcher, a steel secondary cable that had spent years bending and flexing under extreme underwater pressure on dive after dive, finally snapped during that storm. Kaiko sank and was never recovered, despite an extensive search of the surrounding waters in the days that followed. The vehicle that had reached the bottom of the Mariana Trench filmed a plastic bag resting where almost nothing man-made should have ever been, and helped collect the very amphipods that later revealed a hidden pollution crisis was simply gone, swallowed by the same ocean it had spent nearly a decade quietly exploring. Years of underwater cable stress had worn the steel down, bit by bit, until it finally gave out all at once, with no warning and no chance to recover the equipment before it was lost for good. A replacement vehicle, later named Kaiko 7000T, eventually took over research duties for the Japanese team. That replacement, however, was only rated to dive as deep as 7,000 meters, far short of the 11,000-meter trenches its predecessor had once been capable of reaching on a routine basis. For a stretch of years afterward, no robot rated to survive that same crushing depth was ready to take Kaiko's place, and some of the ocean's deepest secrets simply stayed out of reach a while longer, waiting for the next generation of machines to catch up. What it all adds up to. None of this involved a sea monster, a strange predator, or anything lurking in the dark, waiting to ambush a camera 9 miles down. Every piece of this story comes from actual recorded footage, a public debris database built and maintained by Japanese researchers, and a peer-reviewed scientific study published in a respected academic journal. That is exactly what makes the whole thing so unsettling in the end. A machine with no crew aboard traveled to the one place on Earth that should have been the most untouched by human activity in existence, and what it found instead was solid proof that nowhere left on the planet is truly out of reach anymore. A plastic bag sitting quietly on the seafloor nearly 7 miles down was never just an isolated accident. It was a small, visible warning sign pointing toward a much larger and far less visible problem, one that had already worked its way deep into the bodies of small creatures living at the very bottom of the world. Creatures that had never once come anywhere near a factory, a city, or a single human being. The robot that helped reveal all of this eventually vanished into the very ocean it had spent years quietly exploring, and the questions it first raised about how far human pollution can actually travel are still being studied by scientists today, with new answers surfacing slowly, one deep-sea mission at a time. If this kind of deep ocean mystery is your thing, subscribing helps more of these stories reach you the moment they come out.